was like there was so much hair.
Do you play? Do you still play hockey?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, nice.
I do. But yeah, it's like it was voluminous.
Voluminous. Easy breezy, beautiful. From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Thursday afternoon in January. John, we are going to talk about some trade options for the Orioles as they look to continue to address their starting rotation. And we'll have some more thoughts on the addition of Charlie Morton because we have yet to get John's thoughts. But John, this is the first time that we can officially say we are co-hosts of this podcast going forward.
Yeah, we're doing this.
How does it feel?
It feels good.
Have you ever been a co-host of a podcast in your previous endeavors?
No, we did some not long form, but like medium form video stuff at the Sun at some point when that was like a thing. I don't know. Yeah, I can say the word Sun. That's
you can. I was thinking we don't have a block against them.
Yeah, no. We did some video type stuff. It was pretty fun. It could have been, repurposed as a podcast if that was such a thing. Mm-hmm. But it's really great because, my new agreement with the Banner for this year.
Yeah.
I might write a little bit less, but this is a good, we're going to do this in addition to the writing. And I can't think of a better time to not feel like I need to write as much about the Orioles than right now because I'm kind of at a loss for what to say that hasn't already been said or that isn't this insane that doesn't. It's really challenging. I don't know what to say anymore.
Yeah.
Do you understand why I might feel that way?
Yes,
Paul?
and it's tough because that is your job is to say things about the team.
God,
and
don't I know it?
If you can't say anything about the team, no, it does feel like at this point in the offseason we're having a lot of the same conversations over and over again. I don't think this is as bad as previous Orioles off seasons where they did almost nothing and we were having the exact same conversations over and over again. I still think the Orioles have spaced out their moves somewhat. They signed. I wish they would have given more breathing time between Tyler O'Neill and Gary Sanchez, so we could break those down separately.
Yeah.
But they gave us Tomoyuki Sugano, and then most recently, obviously, they signed Charlie Morton. So they've broken it up a good amount. But what would really be nice is maybe like a move right around the same time as last year, like a February 1st when they made their Corbin Burns trade, having a move 2 weeks before spring training. Orioles make a move like that, a trade.
Yeah, well, I think that would put it relatively in line, and I'm saying this having no idea when the Birdland Caravan actually is, but nothing will drum up excitement for the Caravan like a big trade like that.
Yeah, I think the Birdland Caravan, I have to look at my Google Calendar. I think it's the last weekend of January.
It is. I haven't had the opportunity to put that in my calendar yet. I still might. You
still might. I mean, come on. They're going to be making some important stops. By the way, as we go live here, today is arbitration deadline day, and I get a notification from Mark Feinsand on Twitter that Adley Rutschman and the Orioles have settled for $5.5 million for 2025. This is a confusing day for fans because I think a lot of people say, hold on, do we just give Adley Rutschman a new contract? What is going on here? I thought he was already under contract. As these players the Orioles come into today with 11 players who need to sign deals by the end of today or they risk going to arbitration. All these players are under team control. It's just a matter of how much they are going to be paid for the 2025 season. So they technically have to sign new contracts. But I have to say, this has got to be the worst day for fans or for us to have Twitter notifications on for baseball Twitter because my phone is blowing up. And I'll be honest, I don't care about the arbitration settlements around the league. I don't care that the Angels and Joe Adell just settled for $2.2 million.
Yeah.
That just doesn't really register is my interest.
Yeah, I mean, it's notable, I think, for Adley Rutschman. I believe that the last 2 years, before you get to arbitration, it's a formality. You are going to make whatever the team says you're going to make. But,
right.
You can either agree to that or the team can just renew your contract because you're actively not agreeing to it. Right, and I believe Adley Rutschman is one of the handful of players the last couple of years, along with Gunnar Henderson, who have been renewed. So, that he was able to, agree to this figure is, I guess, good. And, even if he wouldn't, he would still, make a good bit of money if they went to a hearing, and that would be good too. And that's where we're at.
Yeah. So there was some breaking news. Orioles still have 10 other guys that they got to come to an agreement with. As Mike Elias loves to say every year, we always have file and move on policy.
Yeah. And then they sometimes don't. And then they, but this is also, if we're talking about things that people want to see happen, this is the time as you're making these calls to the agents. And I'm sure everyone in the front office has their players they're dealing with. Like, there's a lot of moving parts in this time, but this is also a time to start, if there are going to be conversations about long-term deals, like while you got them on the phone, you might as well start to broach that. So I would be interested, this is really the first full cycle of all this stuff with the new ownership where these things are possible. I guess they were always theoretically possible, but like actually in reality possible. This is the time when those conversations could start to happen.
Yeah. And, for Adley Rutschman, this is his first year of arbitration eligibility. He gets a big raise here. Still has a few more years under contract, but we're in this period now where you've got Adley hitting arbitration. You've got a lot of players who are about to, and Gunnar Henderson, and Jordan Westburg's a couple years off from that, but he's going to join that category. Grayson Rodriguez. The Orioles' payroll is going to go up naturally, just because these guys are going to be hitting arbitration. They're going to get their raises, and that's a large reason why, as you wrote about on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, that the Orioles' payroll has gone up. And it is projected to go up by a good bit, by about $45 million between last year and this year. And it puts them right now, as we stand, at 15th in Major League Baseball. So smack dab in the middle, which is an improvement, certainly. The Orioles signed Tyler O'Neill, they signed Tomoyuki Sugano, they signed Gary Sanchez, and they signed Charlie Morton. And all of their arbitration-eligible players are going to get bumps, and really the only one that they didn't tender a contract to that they could have was that they didn't pick up his player option, or team option, I should say, was Danny Coulombe. So their payroll is going up. But you look at this offseason right now and everything that they've done. They refreshed the coaching staff. They moved the wall back in. Have they done enough? Have they done enough to improve off their 90-win season from last year? Long pause.
Gosh, audio medium.
Yep.
I should say something. No. Okay. So I said no.
Okay.
That's the answer to have they done enough to improve on last year's 90 wins?
Sure.
No. Is the improvement off last year's win total going to be based off what they do in the offseason? Probably not. I say that because when they were at their best last year, they were better than the team they ended up being at the end of the season, I think by a considerable margin.
Yes.
That's because the offense was healthy and humming. When you had Adley Rutschman as the Adley Rutschman we knew before the All-Star break, when you had Jordan Westburg and Ryan Mountcastle, kind of lengthening the lineup, when you had Colton Cowser at his best, when you had Gunnar Henderson doing what Gunnar Henderson does. Granted, Anthony Santander's in that mix too, but I think that this team's ability to outperform last year is concentrated in the players that are already on the roster, the players that are already the core. What they've done this offseason is, to me, an exercise in making sure that floor is reinforced, that those guys are supported, and that the team is prepared for all the number of terrible things that could possibly happen. They had to go out and make significant moves to bolster their pitching staff last year because all their pitchers got hurt. That's just a reality of what happened. The rotation this pitching staff had a 5-something ERA in July, and this team was going in a bad direction. They fixed that, and then they stopped hitting, and things kind of got weird. But there are a number of starters now where you're not going to be in the bind that you were last year, because you're talking about 6, 7, maybe 8 starters who you can give them the ball at 6:35 on home games, and whatever time road teams want to play, and you can expect to win if you have a good offense that can score 5 some runs a game, which this team I think expects to have. They've also given Brandon Hyde a lot of leverage to pull in game. As the Orioles kind of deteriorated offensively, that coincided, whether it's causation or actual just coincidence. Like, he didn't have the ability to swap out guys in game, the Orioles were a better team for the times that they took Ryan O'Hearn out of the lineup and put in Ryan Mountcastle in the 6th inning because there was a lefty on the mound. Like, that worked out. That type of stuff worked out for the Orioles, and they couldn't really do that when they didn't have the depth. So it feels like they're just trying to, reinforce what they had and what they're able to do when they're at their best, and make it so that, like, they have the ability to win as many games as possible in the regular season, which is how you get to the playoffs, which is where they need to actually prove it.
Right. I think it's frustrating because like you said, a lot of these improvements have to come from within. There's no other than signing Corbin Burnes, there's no one big move that the Orioles could make in the offseason, I don't think, that would dramatically change their title odds. I think if you go into next season, if you get, Adley Rutschman, the second half of 2024, Adley Rutschman, the team is going to struggle. If you get more injuries to Jordan Westburg and Ryan Mountcastle and a lot of your right-handed hitters, the team is going to struggle. But if you bet on Rutschman figuring stuff out, getting back to himself, if you bet on Colton Cowser improving, if you bet on Jordan Westburg staying healthy, Ryan Mountcastle staying healthy, your pitching staff overall just being healthier, if you bet on the guys that you already brought in at last year's trade deadline, the 2 relievers, if you can bet on those kind of improvements, then you can say they're going to just get better by rolling back a lot of the same elements of last year's team. But one of the big elements of last year's team that made them so good from start to finish, especially in the first half of the season and then the playoffs, was Corbin Burnes.
Yes.
And I think this team did a good job replacing Anthony Santander's production and Tyler O'Neill, assuming he stays healthy. I think that's, they maybe take a slight step back, but in a lot of ways, Tyler O'Neill provides a lot of what Anthony Santander did at the plate, at least. So I think they did okay there. They don't have an in-house replacement, and they have not signed or traded for a replacement for Corbin Burnes. They've added Tomoyuki Sugano. They've added Charlie Morton. That is terrific, and that helps kind of maybe replace, like John Means, for instance. That helps replace Tyler Wells, who's coming back from injury. That helps replace a little bit of Kyle Bradish, although Kyle Bradish is a higher ceiling than any of those guys. Yeah. It doesn't replace Corbin Burnes, and that's why I have 5 guys that I think the Orioles could trade for still, because that's the one area. I know they have 5 guys right now that they can fit into a rotation, but this team without an ace is simply not as good as last year's team with Corbin Burnes.
Correct. And I would preface what we're going to talk about and the trades of, like, if Roki Sasaki chooses to sign with the Orioles, if they're in the mix on this, which we expect they would be, and if they're, and they operate silently because that's what they do. So, like, if they're meeting with him, we wouldn't know.
The last 2 signings, I think, Charlie Morton and Tomoyuki Sugano, came from the Orioles just tweeting them out. Just a press release. Yeah. Which is crazy.
It's, it's funny because, like, you see the notification, like the email alert, and it's like, you assume it says roster move. You're like, oh, they claim some guy off waivers from the Reds. And it's like, no, they signed Charlie Morton.
Yeah. Like, the Mets didn't sign Juan Soto didn't announce it by just tweeting it out. Like, it was broken by every single reporter before they got there.
Yes. So I would preface this to say, like, if they sign Roki Sasaki, like, while maybe not like a ready-made ace, like, there's ace like materials in there's top of the rotation stuff in there, and I think at that point, if they do bring him into the mix, like, the Orioles wouldn't lose the ability to trade for somebody to go near the top end of the rotation, but it would feel like the type of thing where they can kind of just, like, put down tools for the winter and be like, all right, we'll see you in Sarasota. Like, we are set up for success.
No question. If they sign Roki Sasaki, the offseason goes from a C- to an A++. Like, you are getting a 23-year-old ace at the top of your rotation. If that happens, again, I think it's a very low % chance it happens because it looks like he's probably still going to sign with one of the West Coast teams. But, I mean, if that happens, absolutely. Throw out everything that we've said and just hand Michael Elias Executive of the Year. Don't do that already. But, so if it's not Roki Sasaki, it's probably going to have to be trade because there's just about nobody left in the free agent market that would even come close to profiling as a number 1, with the exception of maybe Jack Flaherty, and I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a group, and I listed 5 guys here: Pablo Lopez, Dylan Cease, Luis Castillo, Framber Valdez, and Jordan Montgomery, that I think might make sense in the Orioles rotation. And before we even get into each of these guys individually, the question of what it would take. The Orioles last year trading 2 big league ready guys DL Hall, Joey Ortiz, and a draft pick in order to get 1 year of Corbin Burns. The Orioles' last trade deadline traded away some guys who were farther away from the big leagues in order to get some highly drafted guys, Jackson Baumeister, Mac Horvath, in order to get Zach Eflin. Both those deals accomplished what they needed to. But John, as you look at, this farm system inside and out, you rank this farm system routinely. Do you think that there's a package that the Orioles would put together that would entice teams full of big league ready guys? Or do you think this is more like they're going to have to give some 2024 draftees up, some 22-year-old, that they have no idea what they have in, and some international signings in order to get somebody?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter at this point than replicating the Corbin Burns type deal. What you have to remember in that is that, DL Hall and Joey Ortiz, depending on what rankings, I don't remember specifically where they were in Baseball America, those are like 6, 7, like 5 to 8 range in the system.
Yeah.
And they were also like completely known commodities with big league experience who had gotten to the big leagues. DL Hall's case had success in the big leagues, pitched really well down the stretch in 2022. No, 2023.
Yeah.
And they were also not the untouchable guys at the top of the organization. We know who those guys were. Some of them are still there.
Yep. Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad,
Jackson Holiday, in that mix too. They were not those types of guys who were high minors, big leagues, ready, like projections are going to like them, all this type of stuff. They don't have that cushion of like the next layer of those guys that they could trade if they want to keep the top handful that are all those things that are big league ready, that are, ready to contribute, that are proven with extensive track record in the high minors. There's just not those types of guys. If you're looking at like the back half of the top 10, you're in like the, right, depending on what it is, the Enrique Bradfield, Vance Honeycutt like world, the Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian world. Then you get into some of the lower level pitchers, and there's a ton of them. There are plenty. If a team with a computer and a spreadsheet wants to open up the Orioles page, like they're going to see a lot they like.
Yeah.
There's a lot of young guys who hit the ball incredibly hard that aren't nearly as complete of a young player as Joey Ortiz was, but also have upside. So I think it's going to be it would be more of like a smaller parts to get to that value deal. And when that happens, you're also talking about giving up a lot of potential value if you're the Orioles, because it's easier to trade, 2 players than 4 players. 4 players, you can have 4 players you regret. 2 players, you only have 2 players you regret.
Right.
So that's where that give and take will come. But I think it would be more of a diverse return for a team who is trading with the Orioles if they were going to give up a top starting pitcher.
Right. And that's often, it feels like those are the type of moves where you're giving away a guy who was recently drafted or recently signed internationally that you look back on 5-10 years down the line, and those sometimes end up being either genius moves or they end up being the most boneheaded moves. Like Fernando Tatis Jr. was in one of those trades when he was so young.
Yeah.
So like you because you don't know what these guys are yet. They're still so far away from the big leagues. So it's one of those moves where maybe we're looking back and saying, God, the Orioles really should not have given up Jackson Baumeister, Mac Horvath, or in 5 years be like, whatever happened to those guys? They turned out to be nothing, and the Orioles got Zach Eflin. So you never know.
Yeah, there's really just like, there's no science behind what I'm about to say. It's probably not even actually true, but like it feels to be true, so I'm going to say it anyways. Like there are teams that never regret trading anyone.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember the last guy that the Yankees traded who turned out to be good.
Right. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
The Red Sox, back when they were like a real like machine in player development, like they've traded guys who are good after they were good, like Mookie Betts. That was not smart, but
yeah.
But like they rarely, if ever, regretted trading any of these guys.
Yeah.
The Dodgers, like they're not really, and then there are teams that like routinely trade guys that they shouldn't trade, and like
yeah,
and like it's just a matter of which. I don't know that there's tweeners, and I'm not sure which category the Orioles will be in, but like they either will always regret it or they will never regret it. And like you usually don't regret it if you win too. That helps.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the 5 guys that I think the Orioles could sign or could trade for, I should say. Start with Pablo Lopez, who is 29 years old, made 32 starts last year, 4.08 ERA, 185 innings pitched. He's intriguing because he's under contract for 3 more years, but he's making a lot of money, $21 million through the 2027 season. He was awesome 2 years ago. 2023, made 32 starts. He was terrific, had a 3.66 ERA. Last year took a slight step back, but it wasn't all that concerning. He's got 5-pitch mix. He's got a still very good fastball. It's not as fast as it was 2 years ago, but it still works. Do you like Pablo Lopez for this Orioles rotation? Do you think the Twins might be willing to eager to just get off his money, and that's why the Orioles might be able to swoop in here?
I think the money part makes it interesting in that you're not going to sign a pitcher of his caliber for that kind of money, like 3 years and what would be,
right.
Would be 60 million.
63 million.
Yeah, you are not going to sign that. If he was a free agent right now, you're timesing it's double the years and
right.
4 times the money, if that. It's really significant money. So the fact that they would be able to get that for that, like, that's a fixed cost. That's something they would probably value. I think that would be an attractive candidate, and it would obviously take a lot to do that, but the money also is a factor in that you could reduce the return if the Orioles are willing to take all that on. And
right.
That's something that I think we've seen this year in their the trades last year was Zach Eflin and Sir Anthony Dominguez, and the free agent signings this year. Like, they are more than willing to pay guys like for right now what they think they're worth.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a question anymore. It's just a matter of whether they think that's worth is realistic.
Right. I think, the Zach Eflin move was an interesting stepping stone, and it was a telling sign, hopefully, that the Orioles are willing to take back money and salary, because for the first several years of the Mike Elias era, it was a lot of the opposite. It was Jonathan Villar is going to make $8.5 million in arbitration.
Gone.
See ya.
Gone. Hanser Alberto might have to make 2.
Yeah. See ya.
Out of here.
Speaking of which, also, as we are live on Facebook and Twitter, and comment your thoughts as we go along, we did get 2 more pieces of information from Mark Feinsand. Ryan Mountcastle and the Orioles settled on a $6.787 million deal for 2025 to avoid arbitration, and Cedric Mullins, the Orioles have settled for $8.725 million for Cedric Mullins, who is entering the final year under team control.
Man, I wonder how the conversations with Ryan Mountcastle went. It's like, hey, well, can we just pretend that you didn't move the wall back for 3 years? Can we just add like 30 bombs to whatever you're about to pay me for, and we can go off that? Like,
that is tough. That's why when we talk about the players being upset about the wall moving back and coming back in and stuff, it affects how much money these guys make. It really does, because the case that they can make in arbitration is based off stats.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically talking about, like, free education. Like, Ryan Mountcastle got to learn and appreciate the idea of expected stats, because those were very heartening in the face of what his actual stats ended up being.
Right.
But I don't know that arbitration works that way.
No, I don't think so. So I guess the Orioles are down now to 8 guys that they have to come to terms with. It is nice. I mean, it's again baby steps, but it is nice that we're talking about the Orioles actually paying these guys somewhat a fraction, I think, of what they're worth. All right, next up on our trade list is Dylan Cease. And this guy has been connected to the Orioles for quite a while, going back to his days with the Chicago White Sox. He's 29, 3.47 ERA, 10.6 Ks per 9 in 189 innings. Only got 1 more year under contract, but of the 5 guys on this list, he and maybe Framber Valdez are the closest to aces. I mean, when he is at his best, I think you could say is one of the best pitchers in baseball. It's why San Diego had to trade 4 players in order to acquire him a year ago. Another guy who might be available because the Padres probably are looking down the line and saying this guy is going to cost $200, $300 million in free agency. We don't want to pay that. We want to get what we can for him. Dylan Cease to the Orioles makes a lot of sense for that reason, because you also look at the Corbin Burns deal last year. Orioles traded prospects. They got 1 year of an ace, and it worked out well for both sides. Exactly.
And I think that when you talk about the types of players that the Padres, they'll trade for anybody, and they will trade anybody to get him. They traded a boatload of guys to get Tanner Scott at the deadline this year. They are incredibly aggressive in targeting, stuff and talent. They took Juan Nunez in the Rule 5 draft because he has ridiculous stuff.
Even though he hadn't pitched above high A?
He is expected to be healthy, but he was not healthy this year.
Yeah. Shoulder stuff, I believe.
Yes. They value upside and talent and stuff and tools, and the Orioles have guys with loud tools and big stuff that screens well to organizations that care about that type of stuff, and real quality pitchers to teams that have scouts. Like they have all those types of things. You wouldn't necessarily need to be, they're not going to hang up the phone because you won't give them Kobe Mayo. Like,
Right.
I'm sure they would want Kobe Mayo, or I'm sure all these teams would want all the people at the top of the Orioles prospect list. But the Padres are going to find talent up and down your system if you give them the opportunity to. So I think that would be a unique fit, especially given the work that Kobe Perez and his team have done in the international market the last couple of years to add some players that are starting to get to the low minors. Everything the pitching guys have done that I've written about over the last couple of years, like that type of stuff is really valuable to the Padres. And I think that would be, we're also talking about somebody in Dylan Cease, and I think you could probably back this up. Like people have been clamoring for him for so long that if they actually traded for him, I'm sure people would be thrilled.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Like, not just because he's a good pitcher, but like, we got this guy who's been good, and we've been hearing he's good for like 3 years.
There were already a million Dylan Cease Orioles photoshopped images online.
Yes.
So, like, you've seen him in an Orioles jersey years before he's even been in an Orioles jersey.
Yeah.
One of those just, like, favorite guys of Orioles fans that they would love to have back.
Yeah.
Would love to have. Another veteran, the oldest guy on this list, Luis Castillo, entering his age 32 season. I think Ken Rosenthal connected the Orioles to Luis Castillo not long ago. This is another guy that would make a lot of sense to add to the rotation. 3.64 ERA, 9 strikeouts per 9 in 30 starts this year. Another guy who 2 years ago would have commanded probably a larger return if he were to be traded, because he was 5th in Cy Young voting in 2023 with almost 200 innings and took a slight step back last year, but was still very good. Still great fastball at his age. He signed through 2027 with a vesting option for 2028. He does, I believe, have a full no-trade clause, which makes things complicated. However, if you can convince him to come to Baltimore, if you can, Orioles have an interesting history with accepting players and giving out players who have no trade clauses. Throw it back to Adam Jones in 2018.
They can just tell him they're going to move the wall back again. And like, you get him to accept it.
Wow. The Orioles have put themselves in a quite a quandary.
Yeah.
Where they now have to promise every free agent and every guy who they trade for that they are going to make one adjustment to the wall just for this guy.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. And then they got Mr. Splash to worry about now, too. He's got some extended real estate.
Yeah,
so.
he's got a whole porch up there.
They're going to move the press box out there to the splash pad before long.
And then we can catch some balls like CNL Perez, in our hat if we catch a home run ball.
Potentially out in the open air with a little breeze be cooler, and like it would be a cooler experience, but like overall I'm not signing up for it.
Fun story. I talked to somebody when the Orioles decided to move the wall back in they didn't know anything about baseball, and so I was had to explain to them that the Orioles could move the wall back, but it was really up to them. They had to kind of keep it in certain guidelines, and he was like, so they can just move the wall? They can just like change the dimensions of their ballpark? And I was like, yeah, they can do that. He was like, what if they did it in the middle of a game? It's like, how do you think this works? Do you think it's on like a track pad that they can just move like a sunroof?
Yeah, like those bridges that have like the Jersey barrier that goes to like, you can add like for the commute.
Yes.
Like when you hear about the football teams that do like have the AC going in different directions.
Exactly.
And for when
he was thinking about it from a competitive advantage in the middle of a game. He was like, so you're telling me like bottom of the 5th, you want to hit a home run, they'll move the wall back in? I was like, No, they cannot do that. Short answer.
that would be challenging, but if it was possible, somebody would have definitely tried it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Let's talk before we have more arbitration news. Of course, all this is breaking now, but let's talk about Luis Castillo.
Yeah. So I think this is the type of trade. This would be different to me than obviously there's going to be prospects involved, but like Seattle seems like a team that is always searching for like major league hitting talent. Mm-hmm. They've made some serious attempts to upgrade their offense in the last couple of years. They have a really good pitching development program. Everyone knows that.
You're telling me Victor Robles isn't enough to boost their offense?
I was doing something and looking at like potential players for trades and stuff. I don't even know why I was doing it. But I spent like 10 minutes being like, what is this Victor Robles deal? Like,
how did they do this?
The Nats released him. How does he have like a 2-year contract already?
Yeah.
And like, it was very strange. I did a lot of thinking about Victor Robles in that moment.
I think the bar is, like you said, the bar is so low. They've had so few good offensive players that he came in and hit for like 2 weeks, and they were like, here you go.
Yeah, would
2-year contract.
Would you like some money?
Yeah,
would you like some money, sir? So I think that this is an opportunity if the Orioles wanted to trade from their major league roster. Some of these players that we're talking about who are, under control, who are cost controlled. That could be something that the Mariners would be interested in. The Orioles still also have some, high level hitting prospects that aren't necessarily at the top of their organization, but who, and by virtue of not being at the top of the organization, might be challenged to have a future here that they could offload or use as pieces for the Mariners here. But I put this to you. Do you think there would be do you think that if they traded a hitter off the roster who people like for a starting pitcher, like, how would that go? How would that go over? And I'm not to say that they care. And I'm asking you, so I'm going to be interested in your answer. But it doesn't matter what the reaction is. But I wonder what it would be.
Yeah. The name that comes to mind here is Ryan Mountcastle, because he's only under contract for 2 more years, or only under team control, I should say, for 2 more years. The Orioles have Kobe Mayo, who can play first base, who's coming up. He's another right-handed hitter. Is Luis Castillo a good enough return? If you're dealing away, if you're taking a hit in your lineup and you're giving away Ryan Mountcastle, a guy who, with the ball back in, who knows how many home runs he could hit. Is Luis Castillo a good enough player to get back for Ryan Mountcastle, or would you say we're holding on to him to get if we're going to deal Ryan Mountcastle, we're getting a better pitcher back?
Yeah, I personally think that like the Orioles would be looking at it like, yes, it would be nice to have a pitcher for the top of our rotation, but like, what if they didn't have Luis Castillo? The rotation would not be as good. It would probably be fine. If something happened, if they trade a Ryan Mountcastle type, and Kobe Mayo has the type of adjustment to the big leagues that a lot of young players have, and that he had honestly himself, who is your, Ryan O'Hearn was stretched as an everyday first baseman last year.
Definitely.
Who else is doing that? Like, if you're telling me that like the Kobe Mayo insurance policy is Emmanuel Rivera, I'm not saying okay.
I don't love that.
I'm not cool with that. So that's a fascinating thing. I think they traded Austin Hayes last year. There was not really a place for him to play every day on this roster. They got a good reliever out of it. Like, that is the type of thing that you do. I don't think that even with Kobe Mayo in the mix, ready to get a chance to contribute, that they are in that place in first base in that spot with that right-handed hitting, that where they'd be like, cool. But that's the type of player I feel like the Mariners would want more so than they would want, a Vance Honeycutt or a Judd Fabian or something. I'm just throwing out names, but like,
right, because that doesn't help them right now. I mean, I don't think that we're going to see. Kobe Mayo has immense talent, and I think that he has the potential to hit 35 home runs in the big leagues one day. But I don't think we're going to see something happen. You mentioned Austin Hayes, happen this year between Ryan Mountcastle and Kobe Mayo that happened last year between Austin Hayes and Colton Cowser, where Colton Cowser was phenomenal during spring training, won a spot on the roster, and then the first couple weeks of the season made it clear to everybody he was better right now than Austin Hayes was and usurped that job from him. I think Ryan Mountcastle is not going to let that happen to him. I mean, I think Kobe Mayo is phenomenal, and he could have that. He could hit 400 in spring training and somehow make the team, but I don't think he's going to usurp Ryan Mountcastle's job. So that's a different conversation to have. But that's a fascinating quandary. Let me get to real quick the more breaking news also. Andy Koska of the Baltimore Banner reporting that Dean Kramer and the Orioles avoid an arbitration hearing by agreeing to a $2.95 million deal. And John Heyman reporting that Kyle Bradish and the Orioles settled for $2.35 million. So these guys are getting signed one by one.
They're doing it.
All right.
Who are we missing now? Who are the people who are still? I think I saw a Trevor Rogers agreement out there earlier.
Okay.
I guess some relievers.
Probably.
I
got to look at the list. I'll be honest.
Keegan Aiken is out there. This is great audio.
This is great podcasting. All right, 2 more names we should discuss here as trade candidates for the Orioles. Framber Valdez and Jordan Montgomery. Framber Valdez, another ace-type guy that you could get. Left-hander, 31 years old, 2.91 ERA, in 28 starts this year. Only 1 more year of team control, but he is an ace. He is a lefty. And I'm curious, John, your thoughts. I threw this out last week when I did a reaction podcast to the Orioles signing Charlie Morton. We know this organization loves their matchups. How much do you think it bothers Mike Elias right now that if he were writing down on paper his 5 starting pitchers right now, it probably would not include a lefty. Does that irk him?
Maybe, and I'm gonna say something that makes me, things I've written in the order I've written wrong. Not to say that anyone told me I was wrong, but I think that I think that Cade Povich is held in higher esteem. Like when he's put in, whatever tier he's put in, we're talking about people who could be in the rotation. Like he's not on the Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Eflin, Dean Kramer list, of guys who are gonna be in the rotation. He's not on the signed to be in the rotation list that Charlie Morton and Tomoyuki Sugano are in. But he should, just because that puts him 6 doesn't mean he shouldn't be in there. So I think that he might be I think he might be the lefty that that it's pretty much understood they don't have by virtue of having 5 right-handed starters who are more experienced and above him.
Right.
But I would be fascinated to know whether they count on him to be what he was down the stretch the whole way, which is not to say anything about Framber Valdez. That's not really answering the question at all. I'm very curious to know exactly how much appetite they would have to make a deal for somebody like that, just to fill that need.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I really don't think Mike Elias wants to feel pressure for anything. He doesn't want to feel like we need to do anything. And even at this point, that's why I think he's sitting here. That's partly why he signed Morton and Sugano. He doesn't want to feel pressure to add anybody via trade. He wants to feel like if we can trade for a guy, great. And for a lefty-righty conversation, I don't think he's desperate to get a lefty. I think he very much would like one, though. And I think he views, like you said, Cade Povich and Trevor Rogers as, if we are desperate for a lefty at some point during the season, we'll work away. We'll make sure that we get these guys into the rotation. But we're not going to force anything right now.
Yeah, and there have been times even, with, Cade Povich, I feel like there were times where they shuffled the rotation because they weren't going to be facing teams with a lot of left-handed hitters, and they would try to keep him away from that. In terms of Valdez, that would be an interesting one in terms of a return, because I do wonder whether, the Astros are different than the Astros that this front office left behind. They're doing some different things.
Right.
And I wonder, I don't really know what they would value at this point. They're not a team looking for pieces for the future. They're not necessarily a team built for now, although they have some good players.
Who knows?
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Also, for those watching live on YouTube and Twitter, I think I have fixed the sound. It was messed up for a little bit, but don't worry. I think, let me know if it's fixed or if it continues to drop out. Please comment. All right. Yeah, I think the Astros, and that's why I also think it's difficult to know if Framber is even going to be traded. I think, there are some guys on this list that you're looking at and saying it's more likely that they trade him. But even of the teams that we're listing here, I mean, we're talking about, of the 5 guys, Lopez, Cease, Castillo, Valdez, and Montgomery. We're talking about Minnesota, San Diego, Seattle, Houston, and Arizona. Those are 5 teams that I think would like to be in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
And Mike Elias talked about at the winter meetings that there aren't too many teams that are absolutely 100% tanking. I mean, maybe you could throw the White Sox back in there because they're still terrible.
Yeah.
But there aren't that many teams that are let's trade all our veterans. There are not many teams that are in the position the Orioles were 4 years ago. So it's harder to get these guys. The Orioles made a move last year getting Corbin Burns from a team that ended up being a playoff team. So it happens. It's just can be more difficult to swing a move like this when the team is sitting there saying, Astros are sitting there saying, sure, it would be nice if we could get somebody for some nice prospects for Framber Valdez, but if we don't, we'll have our ace back in the rotation. We'll probably make the playoffs again, and then we'll offer him a qualifying offer.
The qualifying offer, get a pick. And
we'll get a draft pick, and we're fine. Yeah. All right, one more guy I want to talk on in this list, and I had Locked On Orioles Connor Newcomb on the podcast recently, and I listed out a bunch of guys. Jordan Montgomery was on that list, and he used the meme of, all the Army guys lined up against the wall, the last guy's a clown. That is Jordan Montgomery in this instance, because he is not the quality of pitcher that the other guys are.
Different, yeah.
Last year, though, if we had this conversation a year ago, and when he's a free agent, we are talking about the Orioles would have a terrific offseason if they could sign Jordan Montgomery, and he could be their ace before they got Corbin Burns. And then he signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks very, very late in the process, and it went horribly. 6.23 ERA, career low 6.4 Ks per nine in 25 games. 4 of those, he came out of the bullpen. The owner just said a few months ago that signing him was a mistake.
Yeah.
The Arizona Diamondbacks have Corbin Burnes now. Are they more willing, are they eager even, to move off of this guy that they just handed a whole whopping big contract to, who just picked up his $22.5 million player option for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that if they had the opportunity to get off of that they would. It's not exactly... I don't think they'd be operating from a position of strength to be calling teams being like, we would like a bunch of players for Jordan Montgomery, and the answer would be like the guy you said you shouldn't have signed, like the guy who wasn't good. Like, what
their
are you?
GM must have been just banging his head against the wall when the owner said that.
Yeah, that probably wasn't a great moment in that person's life. I wonder if for the Orioles' purposes, like, sure, if the Diamondbacks want to pay him like $15 million and like not take a lot of prospects in return, sure.
Right.
But like if they're that desperate for like a lefty who has pitched well at points and did not pitch well last year, like they could probably sign Patrick Corbin for like a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
but that wouldn't be super exciting.
Yeah.
So again, and we talked about this in the past, like some of these more than others would. And since I think since we had this conversation, they've signed 2 people who like you could put in the middle of their rotation and like have not moved the weighted average of like how many number 1, 2, 3. Like it's all still 3. It's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 as far as the eye can see.
Yeah. Every guy in the rotation right now, you could say we could make the case that he's a 3, maybe a 4.
Yeah, there was a year. I think one of the years the Red Sox won the World Series in like 2017. I don't know that they actually won that year.
2018 they won.
Yeah, so maybe an earlier one. Maybe it was 13. I remember they were going around spring training and like all the starters had T-shirts that said "I'm the ace" because people just kept asking who the ace was. Like, where's the ace in the rotation? And they all had shirts that said "I'm the ace." And I think it ended up going okay for them, but I'm not sure if adding, especially given what they've done, especially given the depth they have, if adding somebody who's not going to raise the ceiling is going to be something they use meaningful resources.
Right. They would have to be making this move, truly believing that he can return to the guy who was the lights out dominant pitcher for the Rangers 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's just a big risk to make, and especially when he's carrying that kind of money. But if you're only giving up a little bit, that feels like the kind of move where, knock on wood, hopefully this doesn't happen, but if the Orioles were to have some big injury in in spring training, that they would have to go out and add him.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't think he really raises the ceiling of the rotation. All right, we've talked for quite long enough. We still got a lot of moves yet to be made on arbitration day. John, where can everybody read your great work?
Here at thebaltimorebanner.com.
I'm excited to be co-hosting this podcast with you going forward.
This is great. It's a good combination. You watched me eat lunch just now.
I did. We're getting to really know each other inside and out.
Yeah, it's a good mix. Like
Andy Koska on our first podcast, I think either our first or second podcast, ate a sandwich during our show. So at least you didn't eat the food during the episode.
No, I did not do that.
Love you, Andy, but that was a wild move.
I apologize in advance for all the germs I'm going to bring in here as the father of 2 young children. I apologize for my long answers, and I apologize for...
We want your long answers.
Yeah, I understand. But I'm learning as a co-host. I asked you a question.
You did.
In this.
That was great.
And I threw it back
love
on you. I could see your face. You're like, is he talking to me?
Somebody's asking me a question?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I participate in the podcast industry. I listen by listening to them, and now I participate by co-hosting a podcast. This is special stuff.
And people already got a taste of just how flawed of a producer I am because the sound didn't work for the first half of the podcast.
Yeah,
so.
do you think it was recording?
It was.
Hear this?
Let's hope so.
I think
the audio.
Decent. Yeah. Right? Like we did an okay job. It would be sad if this was lost.
It really
lost
would.
to history.
I've had that happen a lot in my previous job. Technology just flubbing out on me and then just having to totally re-record. I think the YouTube video will be messed up, so I apologize to everybody who's watching on YouTube. But the audio version should be fine. And we would like you very much, if you're listening to the audio version, to give us a 5-star review, and I will read it out here on the show if you like what you're listening to. Wow, he doesn't already subscribe. A show he's actually been on. John Meoli doesn't subscribe to. You can find it, Banner Baseball Show. Anywhere that you're looking.
Yeah, here we are.
There you go. It's got a rating over 4 stars. You can bump that with a little 5-star review.
That's great.
Thanks for everybody for tuning in as well on YouTube, and we appreciate you joining us in. We have about a month and 4 days until the Orioles report to spring training, and we will have complete coverage on the Banner and on Banner Baseball Show as we get closer to that day. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back next week sometime, perhaps. Let's do it. The Ravens hopefully will still be in the playoffs, and we'll squeeze it in with all our Ravens coverage.
I'll be around.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks so much for tuning in. For John Meoli, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.